So as you can see, our tomato plants are flopping over here and they are really in need of being trellised. So I'm going to show you the quick and easy way that we trellis our tomatoes using T-posts. So to start, this method isn't necessarily just limited to tomatoes. You could really use T-posts to trellis up anything that you need in the garden. We have some pepper plants here that we're also going to trellis. We've done eggplant and some other things in the past too. But our tomato trellising has kind of evolved over the years. So we started with just your standard tomato cage, and those worked all right. I found that you really need to get like the super big heavy duty ones, otherwise your tomatoes pretty quickly outgrow those. And I also found them a bit of a hassle to store in the off season when you're not using them, and then they'd get bent up and things like that. After that, I built a ladder style trellis out of wood, just with some scrap wood that we had lying around, and it looked cool. It worked great at first until about halfway through the growing season. I realized that I drastically underestimated the amount of weight from the tomato plants that was going to be on this thing, and the whole thing like tipped over, and I was fighting it to get it back straight again, and it just never really worked out. So we scrapped that, and that's when I decided that we needed to invest in a good long-term trellising solution for our garden here. Looked into some options, and ultimately just thought, why can't I just use a single T-post for each plant and just trellis the plant up those T-posts? And that's what we have done the last couple of years here, and it really worked out great for us. And so that's what we're going to go through here, how to make that work. There are some different T-post trellising methods out there where you kind of do T-posts every 5-6 feet or so, and then you have either something sturdy kind of connecting on top with string hanging down, and then you trellis up the strings. I think that's a fine method and that can work. I've just found it easiest just to do one T-post per plant, pound it in, trellis your plant up that T-post, and you're done, and it works great. So really quick before we get started, all you're going to need for this is your T-posts. So one T-post per plant that you're going to be trellising up, a TPost Tamper. This makes it really easy to hammer in your T-posts. You can use a sledgehammer, but these are so much easier. And then some sort of twine or string to tie up your plants with. So we're going to start by going up and down each row and pounding in a T-post near the base of each plant. And if you're not familiar with T-posts, one side of the metal post has these studs or ribs on them. And so you're going to place that side out or away from the plant. And that's going to be helpful for when you're tying them up later. The twine or rope that you're using will actually kind of hook around those ribs or studs and kind of help to secure the plant to the T-post, and everything will stay in place. And as far as placement goes, you can see that our plants here are already pretty well established and mature. So I like to place my T-posts a good 6 to 8 inches actually off the base of the plant so that you don't disrupt or mess with the root structure of that plant too much. If it was like a little seedling that had just gone in the ground, you could place your T-posts pretty close up to the plant and they'd be fine. In this case, we're going to give it a little bit of space so we don't mess with anything. So I've found that I like to use 7-foot T-posts, especially for tomato plants. Tomato plants get tall, especially if you have some sort of indeterminate variety that just keeps growing. 7 feet is really what you need for a lot of tomato plants. You can go with 6 feet or less, especially if you're doing peppers or some other plant. But as you can see, that length can make pounding them in a little bit challenging. I'm over 6 feet tall, and I'm just barely able to get up there with the tamper and pound in these posts. So if you are having trouble reaching to the top of the post, you may need some sort of step ladder or stool, something that can get you up to the top of that post. As I mentioned before, having a T-post tamper makes this task so much easier, pounding in those T-posts nice and straight and vertical into the ground. You can use a sledgehammer or something like that, but you're going to have a lot harder time both getting them in and keeping them straight. So I picked up these T-posts a couple of years ago at our local farm store. I think they were around $7 a piece. One thing I'll mention is that if you look for used T-posts, there's a lot of good options out there. And so go on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, see what's available in your area. Usually they're like $3 or $4 a post for used ones, and some of them are in better condition than others. But if you're wanting to save some money and go the used route, that's definitely a really good route to go. You might have a hard time finding the 7-foot length in used, but you can use 6'2" and get them used and hardly spend anything, and that's a really good option as well. And you'll see when I'm pounding these in, I have a line of drip tape irrigation running in each row. So I'm just making sure to move that drip tape out of the way, because otherwise these T-posts will cut or damage that drip tape if it gets too close when you're pounding it in. Also, you only need to pound the T-post about a foot into the ground. So at the base, it has this little metal flat plate at the bottom. These are actually movable on the T-post. You can relocate those, but typically they're located so that the post goes about a foot into the ground. That's really all you need for it to be secure, especially for holding up just one tomato plant. So you're just gonna pound them in until that flat metal plate is just below the surface of the ground. All right, so we've got all of our posts in place for trellising up our plants, and the next step, and really the final step, is just tying up your plants to your T-post and trellising them up. So you're gonna start by just gathering up all the stems of the plant, just bringing the whole plant kind of in as much as you can towards the center post. Make sure to be really delicate and gentle in this step so you're not breaking any stems or branches of anything or damaging the plant in any way. But gather it up, grab a length of twine or rope, wrap it around the plant as best you can in kind of a loose way. You don't want to draw it too tight to kind of choke off the plant, but just in a loose way. Tie it around and just tie a knot. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, just something that's going to hold up throughout the growing season and support your plant. Make sure that that twine is kind of wrapped around one of those studs or knobs of the T-post as well, so that that kind of helps hold it in place so it's secure. And as you're going through and doing this, you'll want to make sure that you have plenty of lengths of your twine, rope, whatever you're using on hand. So I like to use about a 4-foot length. This is actually baling twine, so this came off small square bales of hay, and I just hold on to those and use those for trellising up plants during the growing season. So 4 feet has worked really good for us. You may want to adjust that either longer or shorter based on just your setup, how you tie your plants together, but I use about a 4-foot length. And also you want to make sure to not use anything too thin or something that's going to kind of cut into your plants, especially tomato plants can be fairly delicate. So don't use wire or like a fish string or something really thin. You want something a little bit thicker that's not gonna cut through your plants or wear into them too much over time. That's why I found twine to work out really well. There's this plastic type of twine. There's also like a natural fiber twine. Either one works great, or some sort of rope or string that's a little bit thicker can also work well. So I found when the plants are still young and at this stage that just tying them up one time usually works and does it. But sometimes if the plants are a little bit bigger, or like our cherry tomatoes just grow really long, lean stems and they're kind of harder to gather up, oftentimes with those especially, I'll have to do multiple ties. So just use as many as you need per plant to kind of, trellis it up, get it under control. And then what we do is just keep a close eye on our plants throughout the growing season. Check them every week and just see how much they've grown and if they need any more trellising. And so just keep some extra lengths of whatever you're using to tie them up on hand, and just continue about every foot or so as they grow up that T-post. About every foot is when I usually would trellis them up and tie up another section of the plant so that they kind of stay vertical, stay growing upward. So that's our simple method of how we trellis up our tomatoes here on our homestead. So thanks for stopping by today, and we'll see you next time.